Tim Cook is here. He is the CEO of Apple. He succeeded Steve Jobs in August of 2011. Cook joined Apple in 1998 against the advice of his friends and his own better judgment. He has said Apple in early 1998 was very different than the Apple of today. The company had been losing sales for years and was commonly considered to be on the verge of extinction. He has also said working at Apple was never in any plan that I'd outlined for myself, but was without a doubt the best decision that I ever made. On Tuesday, Cook announced what he called the next chapter in Apple's story at the same venue where Steve Jobs introduced the Macintosh personal computer 30 years ago. He unveiled 3 new products, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6 Plus, and the Apple Watch. He also launched Apple Pay, a mobile payment system that aims to do something about the credit card. I am pleased to have Tim Cook at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Charlie, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we've got much to talk about. You call it the next chapter. Why?
The Apple Watch is the most personal device we've ever created. I think it takes us into a whole different area. We had an intense team working on this for 3 years. And so we explored many different things, and as the product came to fruition, it became not only the timepiece that you would expect, but a device that can do many different things, include really a whole new way of communicating and connecting with people. And also it has a health and fitness component that we think has, could really be profound.
It can take your blood pressure and lots of other things.
Well, it'll start with
heartbeat.
Right, and it will be a sort of a personal trainer for you.
Yeah.
You can set goals, and it will reward you for achieving certain things. You can choose to interact with your doctor. You can choose to combine it with other apps on the phone and get a full view of your health. And so it's a whole new area for Apple. And we think, we're all about making great products and enriching people's lives, and we see it as allowing us to do that at a whole different level. And then, of course, iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus, these are the best iPhones we've ever done. And I think you'll agree. You have them in front of you. They're the best phone you've ever seen.
This is my iPhone, and we'll just show, look at the size of it. This is the iPhone 6.
It's the thinnest phone we've ever done.
Thinnest.
It's the thinnest we've ever done. The screen is just to die for. It's super fast. It's lightning fast. It has a whole new range of wireless technology, and so it's screaming fast on the wireless networks. It's really unbelievable, and it feels unbelievable in your hand. Hold it. I mean, it's something. It's really unbelievable. The design, Johnny and his team did such an incredible job here. It's really seamless between the glass. It's like a singular form.
Yes.
But
back to what's next. I mean, this represents a continuation of the iPhone?
Well, a leapfrog, I would say. But yes, it's an iPhone 6. It's not the first iPhone.
Right.
But it's the biggest advancement ever in iPhone history. And so we think that the upgrade cycle here and the number of people that will switch from other smartphones, it will be enormous.
Were you challenged by what Samsung does and what it has in the development of this size personal smartphone?
No, honestly, Charlie, we could have done a larger iPhone years ago. It's never been about just making a larger phone. It's been about making a better phone in every single way. And so we ship things when they're ready, and we think that both the display technology here, the battery technology, but everything else, and the software. You can still use this phone one-handed because you can tap it twice and the screen will come down.
Yes.
And so the ingenuity here and the fact that we've integrated software, hardware, and services, which I think only Apple can do, this phone, now is the time for it.
There are other watches on the market.
Sure.
Samsung and others.
Sure.
Is the philosophy of Apple, we don't have to be first, we want to be prepared to be the best?
The philosophy has always been to be the best, not the first. If you look back in time at Apple, the iPod was not the first MP3 player. It was arguably the best, and arguably it was the first modern one, but not the first. The iPhone was not the first smartphone. BlackBerry was shipping phones, Palm was shipping phones. iPhone was the first modern smartphone. And then if you look at iPad, tablets were shipping a decade before. And yet iPad arguably was the first modern tablet and the first one that met any level of commercial success. The watch, which I'm wearing here, will be the first watch.
May I see that?
You may see that. And so here...
See if you can get in on this. That's a real look.
So you can see...
You can't get this today. They'll get them in 2015.
You can't get it yet. It's early next year, but you can see some of the apps I've got on here. I may have some things on here.
So which is interesting is that
but
outside entrepreneurs can design apps for this watch.
yes, we've opened it up to developers, and one of the reasons we wanted to announce it before we're shipping is so that the developers will have time to develop software for it. And we think that, based on the first few days, I would say there's going to be a lot of stuff available for it.
There's a fashion item aspect of this, too.
There is.
Johnny brought in his friend Mark Newsom.
He did, and Mark is unbelievable. He's another great addition to the Apple team. But Johnny and team recognized that to wear something, it had to be incredibly personal. It had to reflect your taste and express what you wanted to express about yourself. It's sort of like your clothes and your shoes. You're not going to wear the same thing everybody else does. And so most tech companies, I think, look at this as only technology. We recognize that technology itself isn't sufficient, that it had to have a style element. It had to be something that you're proud of wearing. I mean, this is connected to your body. And so I think
it makes the computer personal.
It makes it very personal. Now, that doesn't take away from the function of it. The function of it is killer. I mean, there is a computer on a chip in here. It's the first one we've ever done. There's 400 or 500 components wrapped in one. It has everything from the GPU to the CPU to memory and all the rest.
But you have to have an iPhone for it to work.
It requires an iPhone, yes. So because they've been designed to work together. And so things like messages, it's using the cellular system to pull down your messages. However, if you go for a run and you don't want to carry your iPhone, music is also in your watch. And so with a Bluetooth headset, you can run and listen to your music without your iPhone.
The healthcare business is a huge sector of our economy.
Yes.
This is your entree into that in some way?
Yeah, I see this as huge,
Trillions
Charlie,
of dollars.
because I think, and I'm not looking at it just from the monetary piece of it, is we do want to enrich people's lives. So we want to make great products that enrich people's lives. Neither one is sufficient by itself. We want to do both. And so arguably with healthcare, there is a wide open field to make some really profound contributions. And so our entry into this is we announced HealthKit in June. HealthKit allows, if you wish, on your phone, you can begin to take all of the data that's in all of your health apps and aggregate those. You might elect just to use that yourself. You might elect to interact with your doctor on them. And so now all of a sudden we've also got a device that gathers certain fitness data about you. And yet, so this is yet another way to begin to build a comprehensive view of your life, which should empower you to take care of yourself over time. And when you need help, it empowers you to take certain data to your doctor to get help from them. All while guarding your privacy so that nobody's getting the data if you don't want them to have the data. Nobody's sharing the data if you don't want them to share the data. And no, we're not keeping it.
In introducing these products, there was the bow to the past, as I suggested. The arena where you had it is where Steve introduced 30 years ago the Macintosh. When you introduced the watch, you famously said one more thing, words that Steve had used. Where is Steve in all this?
Well, he's in my heart, and he is deep in Apple's DNA. His spirit will always be the foundation of the company. Literally think about him every day. His office is still left as it was.
On the fourth floor?
On the fourth floor. His name is still on the door. And we still, if you think about the things that Steve stood for at a macro level, he stood for innovation. He stood for the simple, not the complex. He knew that Apple should only enter areas where we can control the primary technology. All of these things are still deep in our company. There's still things that we very much believe. The strive for perfection, for being the best, for only doing the best products, for staying focused. The fact that despite this table being so small that you and I are sitting at, you could put every Apple product on it, every single one that we ship today, and yet this year our revenues will be, approximately 180 billion. There's probably no other company on the face of the earth that could say that. Most companies begin to do larger and larger and larger portfolios because it's so easy to add, it's hard to edit, it's hard to stay focused, and yet we know we'll only do our best work if we stay focused. And so, the hardest decisions we make are all the things not to work on, frankly. Because there's lots of things we'd like to work on that we have interest in, but we know that we can't do everything great.
Is TV one of those?
Well, TV is one that we continue to have great interest in. So I choose my words carefully there, but TV is one of those things that, if we're really honest, it's stuck back in the 70s. Think about how much your life has changed and all the things around you that has changed. And yet TV, when you go in your living room to watch the TV or wherever it might be, it almost feels like you're rewinding the clock and you've entered a time capsule and you're going backwards. The interface is terrible.
Yes.
I mean, it's awful. And you watch things when they come on unless you remember to record them.
So why don't you fix that?
Well, yeah, I don't want to get into what we're doing in the future, but we've taken stabs with Apple TV, and Apple TV now has over 20 million users, and so it has far exceeded the hobby label that we placed on it, and we've added more and more our content to it this year, and so there's increasingly more things that you can do on there. But this is an area that we continue to look at.
And was this a question for you among some investors, among some consumers, among some people who write about technology? There was the question. Steve was a visionary. Can Tim continue the Apple tradition of creating new products every 4 years or less? Can he reach into the future? Is he have that kind of makeup? Did that concern you? Did you think about that? Were you committed to prove that Apple had a future beyond the groundwork that Steve Jobs had laid?
When he called me one weekend in August of 2011, and he said, "I'd like to talk." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I go, "When?" And he goes, "Now." So I'll be right over. And he told me, he said, "I've been thinking a lot. Apple's never had a professional transition at CEO. I'm determined that we will have one now. I want you to be the CEO." And honestly, I didn't see it coming.
You did not see it coming.
I know you look at me as disbelief,
yes.
but you can say I was in denial or whatever. But I felt Steve was getting better. He was still at home, but I felt he was getting better. I was seeing him regularly, and I guess at the end of the day, I always thought he would bounce. He always had. He had had some incredible lows in his health, and it had always bounced, and I always believed he would. And so it took me a little by surprise for that. I mean, he had talked to me about being CEO before, and so I always knew it was his long-term thinking.
That you would become the CEO.
That I'd become the CEO.
But not then.
But not that specific moment. And so he and I had a discussion back and forth about, because I was testing him on this. I said, well, you know, what kind of things do you want to do as chairman versus me do? And it was just sort of having a good banter with him. And I go, well, it's like, I said, for example, ads, do you want me to just do the ones that I think are right? Or do you want to be involved in it? And he said, well, I hope you'll ask my opinion on some things. But I thought, Charlie, on that day, that he would be chairman for a long time, that I'd be CEO for a long time, and that we would continue to work together. And so, he knew when he chose me that I wasn't like him, that I'm not a carbon copy of him. And so he obviously thought through that deeply about who he wanted to lead Apple. And so that I have always felt the responsibility of. And I've wanted desperately to continue his legacy. And the Apple I deeply love. And so from the onset, I wanted to pour every ounce that I had in myself into the company. And but in terms of being everything he was, I've never had that objective. I've never had the objective of being like him, because I knew the only person I can be is the person I am. Right? And I'm not an actor. I'd be terrible in Hollywood. And so that's what I've done. I've tried to be the best Tim Cook I can be. And I think that the reality is that Apple has always had incredible contributors at very high levels. Johnny's been there forever and contributing at an incredible level, as has Craig and Jeff and Dan. And you just go around the table. We have a new CFO now. There's this group of people, and we've recruited Angela. You know, Angela now runs retail, and Angela Ahrens, she is fantastic. This level of people are capable of doing incredible things, and, you know, it's a privilege of a lifetime to work with them. And
you have a picture in your office of Martin Luther King and a picture of Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy, after his brother's assassination, someone said, the difficulty for him will he'll have no RFK, as he was to his brother, Jack. So I might ask the question, do you have a Tim as you were Tim to Steve?
I think each person, if you're a CEO, the most important thing is to me, is to pick people around you that aren't like you, that complement you, because you want to build a puzzle. You don't want to stack chiclets up and have everyone be the same. And so I believe in diversity with a capital D. And that's diversity in thought, and diversity in any way that you want to measure it. And so the people that surrounded me are not like me. They have skills that I don't have. I may have some that they don't have. What we do as a team collectively are able to do some incredible things. And it's because we collaborate, and I see one of my key things in life is to make sure that we collaborate at an incredible level, because we run the company functionally. We're not like the typical big company that has N number of divisions and N number of P&Ls. Everybody is a functional expert, and then we collectively, to get things done, we work together as a team, because the work really happens horizontally in our company, not vertically. Products are horizontal. It takes hardware plus software plus services to make a killer product. And so all of these people, if you were to line us up and talk to everyone, you know several of them, we're all different. And that's the power of it, is that we're not trying to put everyone through a car wash and so they look alike, talk alike, think alike at the end of the day. We argue and debate. If you were to come in our executive team meetings on Mondays, you'd hear a lot of discussion and debate about something. We don't always agree on everything. But we have great respect for one another, and we trust one another, and we complement one another, and that makes it all work.
Did the team, you leading the team, have any question that you could accomplish what you did, knowing those questions were out there about the future of Apple?
I think for me, I can't talk about what everybody else thinks, but for me, I'm one great skill I have is blocking noise. And so I typically read and listen to things that are deep and challenging and intellectual in nature, not just the noise. I think if you get caught up in the noise as a CEO, you're going to be a terrible CEO, because there's so much noise out there in the world that everybody's on the sidelines saying what you should do, shouldn't do, et cetera. It's sort of like the old Roosevelt quote, "In the arena."
Right. Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes.
The credit belongs to the man in the arena who gets dirty and all of those things.
Yes. Well, I'm the dirty one.
Yeah.
And you have to block the noise. And so the question, I think, is, did I have doubts? The answer is no. And did the executive team have doubts? I think you can see in our products that we were all betting on each other in a big way.
But that goes back to my original question.
Yeah.
Apple is becoming, it's building on its tradition, but it's doing things different. Steve said to you, don't ever ask yourself, what would Steve do, correct?
He did.
Don't ask that. Do what you think you need to do based on the circumstances that you face. So is Apple becoming more open? I've mentioned the fact that people who have create apps can do it for the watch. Mm-hmm. You're now engaged in partnerships with people like IBM. You've made an acquisition. Tell me, where is Apple going?
Are we more open? Yes.
Are we
Yes.
more engaged by partnerships? Are we interested in enterprise because we can partner with IBM?
I think IBM that's a great one to talk about for a moment, because I think it'll give you an insight into how we look at things, and this is probably different than the past. We look at these products and the iPads that aren't here, and we think we can change the way people work. We've changed the consumer's life. We've changed the way students learn and teachers teach. But when you get to the working environment, the change that we've made to us isn't significant enough. And so we begin to ask ourselves, why? Why haven't we done more? The real answer is, in the applications, there's not enough apps that have been written for verticals, for very deep verticals, like what the airline pilot does, what the bank teller does, down at the level of the job. And so we begin to ask ourselves, should we do this, or should we partner, or should we just forget it? And I didn't want to forget it, because this is a way to enrich people's lives in a big way, to change the way people work. I mean, most of our life is spent working. And certainly our apps are changing the way I work, but I'm not seeing it as much in other places. And so we began looking out and thinking about, well, who could we partner with? And Jenny and I had been talking about some other things for a while. I have great respect for her, great trust in her. I think she's
the CEO of IBM.
As the CEO of IBM, she's fantastic. And we began to talk about this area. You know, this is an area where they've got things that we don't have. They have deep vertical knowledge of many different verticals, right? They have a huge sales force. And so IBM brings significant enterprise knowledge to the table. We bring the products that enterprise want. And so we have something they don't have. Well, we also don't compete on anything. To me, this is the perfect marriage. There's no friction. There's just, we have what they need, they have what we need. Together, we can provide something to customers that is blow away. And so IBM is in the process, with our help, of designing many different apps for many different verticals, from banking to all the different financial services to pharmaceutical to aerospace and manufacturing and so on and so forth. And they have the go-to-market that we don't have. And so this is an area where I think that everybody's going to win. We're going to win. IBM's going to win. And more importantly than both of us, the customer's going to win.
Why did you think you had to buy a headphone manufacturer?
In Beats, what we saw is several things. We saw
Talent.
Talent that I'm super impressed with. Jimmy and Dre, off the charts, creative geniuses. They also had teams underneath them that I really liked. Jimmy has a deep knowledge of the musical industry. Dre knows artists. Dre is an artist. And they had started a subscription service. And this subscription service, you know, some people think they're all alike. Well, let me tell you, I went into the thing skeptically. Like I should.
Acquisition? Yeah.
Not to the acquisition, into their service, because Jimmy had told me how great it was. And so one night I'm sitting playing with theirs versus some others, and all of a sudden it dawns on me that when I listen to theirs for a while, I feel completely different. And the reason is that they recognized that human curation was important in the subscription service, that the sequencing of songs that you listen to affect how you feel. It's hard to describe, but you know it when you feel it. And so that night, I couldn't sleep that night. And so I was thinking, we need to do this. They also have, I think they've done a fabulous job with their brand and in the headphone business. It's a fast-growing business. They went into it not too long ago and, you know, have done really well. However, they needed a global footprint. We have a global footprint. They have been primarily U.S., not solely U.S., but primarily U.S. And so I felt we could get a subscription service. We could get incredible talent, and that I think we can all put our heads together and do some things that are beyond what either of us are currently doing. And we could get a fast-growing business. And, you know, financially is not the only element of looking at it at all. But next year, or in our fiscal year, which is about to start, it's accretive. When's the last time you heard of a technology CEO saying that they were doing an acquisition that was accretive?
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. And so I think it's wonderful to get the influx of talent, the different perspectives. It's this idea of diversity that I use in a big way. I think it's really going to help us. And I am 100% sold on the music subscription service. And, of course, we can scale it where Beats would have had a more difficult time because they're a small company.
Is the new chapter in Apple also defined by the fact that you're moving away from just being essentially a hardware company?
You know, I wouldn't say that we were never just a hardware company, and so I would define that a little differently. But a
significant part of your revenue comes from the iPhone, for example.
But a significant part of the iPhone is the software and the services.
Right.
It's just that we don't split out the price between the hardware and the software and the services.
It's all part of your own ecosystem.
It's part of our own ecosystem, and we do that because it all works together. It just works when you do it that way. When you split the two, you wind up with, I mean, think about what happened in the PC area. When you had a Windows and a separate OEM that was doing hardware and then somebody else that was doing apps, and you have a problem, you're pulling your hair out, you call the help desk, and the help desk tells you to call another help desk, and that help desk tells you to call somebody else, and the other guy doesn't even have a help desk. So we recognized early on that these kind of devices, you really need to have a womb-to-tomb view of them for the customer's sake. And so if somebody calls us, it's our problem. We're not passing the buck. And so I think you get a much better customer experience.
But do you miss opportunity to take advantage of a whole group of people? Because,
well, look at our ecosystem,
Yeah.
Charlie. I mean, we've got 9 million registered developers. And so we're not having a problem getting people to develop for our platform. If you were at our conference in June in San Francisco, there's developers there from almost every country in the world, and they're writing
so
for
you have
iOS.
all the innovation, access to all the innovation.
We have incredible access to innovation. And we also view it and treat it, it's a privilege to work with the developers we do. And so we treat them like it's a privilege. And from their point of view, they get to design something from a company that has over 90% of their customers on one version of the operating system. So we're not fragmented like Android is, right? We'll release iOS 8 next week. And right now, iOS 7, the one that we just released a year ago, 92% of our customers are running iOS 7. If you looked at a comparable number for Android, it's very low. It's extremely low. If you looked at a comparable number for Windows on the PC side, very low. And so you can really write software to the latest, or write your app to the latest software versus spending your time on all of these versions and iterations and so forth. So it's great from their point of view, and they get to sell their product worldwide. Think about how it used to be if you were a developer. You had to go negotiate with every retailer, and there's no global retailers. And so you were negotiating in every country in the world trying to get your product on the shelf. Here, you can push a button, we review it, and it quickly gets in the App Store, and it's in an App Store in 155 countries. I mean, it's really shocking. The jobs that this thing has created is unbelievable. We're now, between the people that we employ directly and the developers, and developers are a big piece of this, we're responsible for 1 million jobs in the United States. And a lot of that are people that have concluded to write apps.
Who is your competition?
Well, Google.
People
clearly.
will say Samsung instantly because of the products. They make smartphones like this. Not like this, but they make smartphones. They have the Android operating system, which is the largest operating system in the world.
Well, Google supplies that to
Right.
them. And so I think I would say
Google is your competition.
Google would be the top. And then they enable many people in the hardware business, like Samsung.
Right.
And Samsung is the best of the hardware companies in the Android sphere.
Google is a competition. Who else?
You know, who else?
The big four are Amazon, in terms of most people's consideration. Amazon, Apple, Facebook.
Yeah, I don't consider Facebook a competitor. I consider Facebook a partner.
Right.
We're not in the social networking business.
And will not be.
We have no plans to be in the social networking area. We partner with both Facebook and Twitter, and we have integrated both of them into the operating system. And so we've worked closely with both of them so that our customers can get access in a different and unique way to their services. And we like both companies.
Amazon?
Amazon, we don't work with that much. We have little relationship there. They sell, as you know, they come up with a phone.
Right.
You don't see it in a lot of places. They have some tablets, but they're not a product company. Apple's a product company. And so in the long term, will they become a bigger product company? I don't know. You'd have to ask Jeff what his plans are. But when I think of competitor, I would think of Google as the...
So all the successes you have pointed to, when you do something that's not as much of a success, and I'm obviously thinking of maps,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at it, what did you do wrong?
Oh, we screwed up. To put it bluntly, there are many screw-ups in that one. There's just not one. There's many, and we've learned and corrected and are continuing to invest in maps because our fundamental premise that maps were really key to Apple is the same as when we made that call many years ago. But we did screw up on the release. It should not have happened like it did. It shouldn't have come out. And you know, sometimes when you're running fast, you slip and you fall. And I think the best thing you can do is get back up and say, I'm sorry. And you try to remedy the situation, and you work like hell to make the product right. If you're probably never making a mistake, you're probably not doing enough.
I mentioned the beginning interview and the fact of when you made a decision in 1998 about Apple, and you had some reservations. But at the same time, during your interview with Steve, you said something like this: I was prepared within 5 minutes to throw caution to the wind. What did he say that made you believe this company is the place for Tim Cook?
It was an interesting meeting. I had gotten a call several times from the search people that he had employed, and I kept saying no. I was at Compaq. I was happy, or thought I was, and they were persistent. And so I finally thought, you know, I'm going to go out and take the meeting. Steve created the whole industry that I'm in. I'd love to meet him.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm honestly going into the meeting.
There's no downside to this.
Well, I'm just thinking I'm going to meet him, and all of a sudden he's talking about his strategy and his vision, and what he was doing was going 100% into consumer, when everybody else in the industry had decided you couldn't make any money in consumer, so they were headed to servers and storage in the enterprise. And I'd always thought that following the herd was not a good thing.
Yes,
it was a terrible thing to do,
exactly.
right? It was, you're either going to lose big or lose, but those are the two options. He was doing something totally different, and he told me a little about the design, enough to get me really interested. And he was describing what later would be called the iMac.
Yeah.
And the way that he talked and the way the chemistry was in the room, it was just he and I could tell I can work with him. And I looked at the problems Apple had, and I thought, you know, I can make a contribution here. And working with him, and this is a privilege of a lifetime. And so all of a sudden, I thought, I'm doing it. I'm going for it. And you have this voice in your ear that says, go west, young man, go west. I was young at the time. But you know, you come back and you try to do the things that people do with spreadsheets and stuff, and none of it makes sense. It didn't make sense. And yet, my gut said, go for it. And I listened to my gut. There was literally no one around me that was advising me to do it.
But in your speech at Auburn, your commencement speech, you spoke to intuition.
Yes. And that's what I mean by gut.
Yeah.
My intuition was telling me loudly to go. And it wasn't based on, you know, as an engineer, you want to write down pros and cons, and the financial part you want to look at, and you want it to say, go. You want it to sort of validate the decision that your guts come. And it never did. Because, you know, Michael Dell had made a comment weeks earlier that if he were the CEO, and he was a very respected CEO, that if he were the CEO of Apple, he would close it down and give the money back to the shareholders.
Yeah.
That it had no future.
I remember he said that. Yeah.
You know, and he was just saying what everybody thought.
They didn't know Steve Jobs.
They didn't know Steve. And so in that meeting, I concluded all of those guys are wrong. They don't know him, and they don't know his vision, and they see things in the traditional way, which Steve never did. You know, he was always looking well beyond the
and looking at things
norm.
with beginner's eyes.
Yes, he had a gift for that. He clearly had a gift for that. And he took that gift and embedded it in the company. It wasn't a gift that he kept to himself. And so I loved many things about him. He's a dear friend, but he was also a great mentor. He was a great teacher. This is something that's never written about him. But what he left in not just me, but many of us, is what he taught us. He was one of the best mentors in the world.
This is more than perfectionism.
Oh, it's much more than that. No, it's much more than that, because that's holding the bar so high that it's very hard to hit. But no, it's teaching, and it's teaching and making sure people are learning, and him taking such an interest, he's going out of his way to do this. And I saw him do that over many years with not just me, but many people. And I think it's missed. It's a huge, huge part of what he did that's missed in most of the things that I've read.
The misconception misses that, the teaching aspect of it.
It does. That and the human aspect of him.
Right.
He was an incredible human being. And I think, I've never read anything that really captured him or captured the Steve I knew.
One of the products you introduced is Apple Pay. Do you have a relationship with credit cards in creating Apple Pay?
We do.
Some say, why didn't you just go around them? Be disruptive.
Well, as it turns out, people love their credit cards. And so I don't know what credit cards you have.
Too many.
But many people love their credit cards because they might love that you collect airline points.
Right.
Or there's something about it that's sticky. And
So you thought, go ahead, tell me.
So we looked at the industry and we said, people like that part. And so we're about making the user's life better, making the experience better. We saw all the mobile payment stuff that had been done as none of it was making anybody's life better. It was more about creating a business model for someone else to make money. We started with the user and we said, what do they really want? Well, nobody wants to carry a wallet. You don't want another thing that you have to remember to put in your pants when you walk out the door. You don't want another thing to lose. You don't really want this card with exposed numbers on it that has a huge security risk on it. And so we fixed the security issue. Our system is much more secure than the traditional credit card system is. We kept the thing that people liked, which is they do love their card. And we said, we don't want any of this data. So we're not doing what other companies are doing. We don't want to know what you're buying. We don't want to know where you're buying it. We don't want to collect all this stuff on Charlie. I don't want to know where you're spending your nights. And so we firewall all the stuff where we don't keep it. It's done on our servers. And so we kept what's great and fixed what wasn't. The retailers love it because it's a far more efficient way for people to check out.
Tell us how it works.
It's very simple. And so if you take one of our phones, this is iPhone 6, literally all you have to do, this phone's not wired, but if it were, all I would have to do is touch the iTouch,
right,
or the Touch ID rather, and hold it within a proximity of the terminal, and that's it. It's done. The transaction is finished because you've authenticated with your fingerprint. Right? Which it's hard to steal a fingerprint. And you've not pulled out a card. You've not jostled through your wallet for something you may have lost. You haven't had to run your credit card through a machine several times and for it to reject your card. None of that is done. It's as simple as boom, boom, it's done.
Technology is a very global thing, as you well know, as well as anyone. Emerging markets are where a lot of people are coming to the middle class, and they have buying power.
Absolutely.
China, Brazil, lots of other places. How do you see that market? And how does Apple do well in that market?
Well, in China, if you look back at the last year, our business in Greater China is about $30 billion. And to my knowledge, that's larger than any American company, certainly in technology, and maybe largest of any, period. We've put a lot of energy in there for years. We've had very fast growth, but you're exactly right. Ultimately, what's causing that is you have a significant number of people moving into the middle class. Large numbers, unprecedented large numbers. This is also happening in Brazil. It's happening in Turkey. It's happening in Thailand. It's happening in Malaysia. It's happening in many different places. Indonesia is beginning. It's at a different place in that curve.
Does price point become an issue, though, in terms of people who don't have the same per capita income as they do in the United States?
Yeah, certainly income is a gating factor. But there's a lot of retailers that will allow smartphones to be paid for over time. In China, there's a subsidy on smartphones if you sign a contract, much like the United States. And so there are ways to make it more affordable. Also, this is iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, but we also sell iPhone 5S and iPhone 5C. And all of these just got lower prices on Tuesday this week.
Because of the entry of the new products.
Because of the entry of the new products. And so you will find in emerging markets, the mix of product sales are sometimes different in those markets versus other markets.
You spend a lot of money on research.
We spend a lot of money in R&D.
And what's
that
it about?
number has ramped dramatically. That's true. Some of that is spent for things that aren't shipping yet, like the Apple Watch is an example of that. You know, I've announced it now so everybody can see it, but we've been spending money for 3 years on it because we started the development about 3 years ago. And there's obviously other things that we're working on that right now isn't apparent. And so we're always doing that. And we're also working on things like this that is apparent.
Here's what's interesting about you and about Steve Jobs.
We're both secretive.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's hard to get something. It's also this, though. John Doerr told me a story once about going with Steve into a camera shop. You know, and Steve stood there and sort of asked to see this camera and that camera, and he said, boy, we could make a better camera. You get a sense that you guys have ideas for products that might be part of the future, which no one knows about. But you're thinking about it. You're looking ahead and saying the future.
There are products that we're working on that no one knows about. Yes, that haven't been rumored about yet. Yes, and some of those are going to come out and be blowaway probably, and some of those we'll probably decide, you know, that one we're going to stop. And so we kick around a lot of things internally. And we might start something and get down the road a little bit and have a different idea. I mean, Steve told a story on the publicly about the iPad. You know, the iPad was started way in advance of when it came out, many years before. It was put on the shelf.
Yeah, tablets was not a new idea.
It was not a new idea. It was shelved because of the idea to make iPhone.
Yeah.
And the team was reallocated to work on iPhone, and then the iPhone came out, and after iPhone got up and running, we brought the iPad out. And so there are always things that we're looking at that are drawing R&D expense where there's not associated revenue with it. That's just us betting on the future.
And it may be an ancillary benefit. You may find something along the route to doing something that you want to do that you wouldn't have imagined or had gotten there unless you started on that road.
That's right. A lot of what leads to innovation is curiosity. Yeah. It's curiosity to begin pulling a string, and you see where it takes you. And a lot of what we do isn't apparent to the public in the beginning where it's going to lead, like Touch ID as an example. When we did Touch ID a year ago, a lot of people just thought Touch ID was a way to get into your phone, and it's very cool at doing that. But then we also said, well, you can buy stuff from Apple with it. Obviously, the entire time, we're planning to do a much broader rollout for mobile payments with Touch ID. But we invest in a lot of things that have long tentacles and, you know, for decades or so, not just for point products. Point products don't thrill us.
Hacking of iCloud. caused a lot of people.
It wasn't hacked. There's a misunderstanding about this. If you think about what hacking iCloud would mean, it means somebody would get into the cloud and could go fish around in people's accounts. That didn't happen. What happened was that, like, let's take you. It didn't happen to you, I hope, but let's take you as an example. Somebody could say, "Oh, you know, I know Charlie's ID from somehow."
I know his email, perhaps. Or...
Maybe it's his email, and they may guess your password, or that's not as likely. They might phish it.
Right.
How do you phish it? I could pretend to be somebody else, and you could unknowingly give me your password. And that happens on the internet too many times today. That's the #1 issue by far. And it's not an Apple issue. This is an internet issue. You just saw that this happened to, I think, millions of Gmail users.
Right.
They were phished. My understanding is it wasn't a breach there either of the infrastructure. It was a phishing expedition. There are lots of bad people that do this. And what we said was, instead of just saying, hey, there's a lot of bad people that do this, we need to figure out how can we try to protect our customers on this. That's our top goal. And so we're working internally about how to bring more awareness to these schemes and trying to do things to
You mean a public information process? I mean,
some of it is that. Some of it is like the old, like an old public service announcement used to be.
Right.
We have to do that, and then in addition, we have to do things where it notifies the customer quickly if it does happen. That's reactive, and we don't want it to happen at all, but if it does, you'd probably want to know instantly. And so there are things like that and some other things that I can't describe right now, where we think we can make a contribution beyond just making sure the cloud's not hackable.
This is different than the hacking of Home Depot or the hacking
Very
of
different.
Target.
No, it's totally different.